Welcome to the StockMatter.com studios here in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I'm your stockmatter Brian Johnson, making professional trading simple. And an interesting day to the markets. I really expected the first couple hours to be, somewhat. Maybe we'll get a move the first couple hours, and then start to see things really kind of dwindle off to nothing for the most part the rest of the day. And not exactly what we saw. We actually saw some pretty good movement coming in later on in the day. Once again, I thought maybe it would come maybe the last hour, people kind of moving positions. No, we actually got it right around the 2 o'clock time period in the Eastern. It's about 12 o'clock my time, so right around straight up noon for me, things started to kind of move again. Now, we did have a giant gap up in the morning, so we were up, 8 points on the SPX to start the day. And then we just slowly started our retreat backwards, which we have seen quite a bit. Very common now. Gap up and fade. Gap up and fade. And we saw that on a lot of different stocks. And once again, saw it today on the indices. What was interesting is that a lot of movement came in about that last 2 hours of the day. Much more than I would have expected. Ultimately, bigger picture, break even. We gapped up, we moved down quite a bit, we moved up quite a bit, and for the most part, end of the day, pretty much right where we started. So if you did happen to leave after the first couple hours of the day, you really honestly didn't miss a whole lot. Especially for swing trading, you didn't miss anything. But you can see here on the Dow how we had this big gap up where right to overhead resistance. Started to fall down, looked like maybe things were going to accelerate to the downside, and then quickly turn around and go right back up again. Typical of what we've seen in the markets lately. So it did come back to rest right below this channel we've been watching. But really, more importantly, what I'm watching is this big movement here. And I'm going to talk more about that this weekend. But look at how we're still within the same trading range. 10,950 to the 10,825 area. It's just chop, sideways chop. And we did get movement within it today, but no change. We're still right in between this thing. So I'm still waiting for more major breaks of one way or the other. From a daily standpoint, you can see we are outside of this blue trend line. We are coming back to retest the underside of this blue trend line. But if you take out the blue trend line, it just looks like another big high base, similar to what we've seen in the past, over the past, few months now. So we'll see if this continues up next week. No reason to think that it won't. And maybe it holds the lower side of this blue trend line ultimately, but still in an upwards motion. NDX on a 60-minute had a really kind of a dive today. It was really down for a while there, and a huge recovery towards the end of the day. But bigger picture, guys, step back, take a bigger look, and look. We just saw it come right back into lower support, bounce right off it, move right back up. It really isn't going anywhere. Still stuck between that 1980 and 1945-ish area here. Ultimately, most of the prices contain between 1970 and 1945. Just bouncing in between here, finding the moving averages. But I'm really looking at this trading range moving sideways, doing exactly what the other indices are doing. Most impressive, though, was that we finally touched this blue line. That has not happened up until today. All the other indices had done it, NASDAQ had not. So we did see it break below it, only to recover and save itself above it by the end of the day. Still showing now as a high base formation. Curious to see it break this, though. We'll see if it'll use this as support and move upwards, or if it's going to break down through here and then come back up and retest the underside like the rest of the indices are doing. From a weekly standpoint, also holding. Remember where I said that overhead resistance was at? 1960 to 1970? Look at that. Stopped right at 1959.50. So right here, still hanging below 1960. Putting in what could be a potential reversal candle for next week. But reversal candles haven't worked all that well in the past. So we have to be very careful if we're going to play that coming into next week. SPX on a 60-minute also doing the same thing. I'll redraw a few lines this week and give you a better idea of what we're looking at here. But you can see move a gap up right into overhead resistance at the 1180 mark, move back down, right back into support at the 1170 mark, and a move back up by the end of the day. Basically keeping, this is more kind of less of a sideways chop like the Dow and more of an upwards channel type of a motion. That's what I'm seeing right now. And I'll draw trend lines this weekend and show you what I'm talking about. Overall, still moving up did have quite a bit of pullback today, but nothing to be scared about because it started on a big gap up. It just retreated from overhead resistance only to come back up, start knocking on the door again. So the markets are still bullish even after the action we saw today. This is my logical stop right here, right up towards the underside of this blue line, and I'm going to assume that this could potentially start to coincide then with the 200-week moving average at 1225. We're not that far away now. Another 40 points, 45 points. Question is, do we see a pullback first before a move back up, or do we go straight there? That's the big question. We will be watching that this weekend. I'll have that for you later on. VIX, you can see us moving up today. For a while, the VIX was up, and then, pow, right back down again. Just no real fear in the markets. Kind of getting people excited and then leaving you high and dry. Here it is, once again, basing sideways, staying between these two lines down here. And what it just, as I said before, it just shows me that there's no fear in the market. There's nothing pouring in here. There's no real concern. We'll know it, I'm sure, when it happens, but for the time being, there's just nothing really to be worried about. So for those of you that might have been, wow, look at that thing really dropped this afternoon, yeah, you got to step back sometimes, take a look at the bigger picture, and you'll see it's just not quite as drastic as you think it is. And it really isn't on any of the charts. Nothing's broken from the bull side. Everything still looks fine. So I'm still watching the VIX. Apple now had an interesting day. Now this one was a little bit more